So first, I'd like to thank Valerie and Margot and John and Chris for inviting me here. And I thought I'd come up with an interesting title for the talk because I think Valerie asked me back in February, and I usually prepare the talks the night before. So coming up with a title was a little tricky, but there is a theme to this. So it's innovation relationships. It's not you, it's me. I'm just going to bring this up because I'm going to have my timer here so I can not lose my time. So I want you to think about what it means in your institution of doing professional development. Who's in charge? Is it you or is it me? So we can go ahead to the next slide, Mark, or should I control it from here? You got it. That'll work good. I'll be a pain for you. So a little bit of detail so you can follow along. Go along with the back channel at FlipConADL. You should have already figured that out. If you're not Twittering, you should be. And you should sit beside someone else who does use Twitter. I offered some people to help them today, but I haven't had the chance to sit down with you yet. Also, I do a course called OpenFlip. I'll talk about that right at the end of the slide, so you might check out that hashtag at some time. Flip class is, of course, an important hashtag for conversations in this Flip class community. And that's my Twitter handle, at Ken_Bauer. Don't forget the underscore, because if you don't, then you get a different Ken Bauer, who's also Canadian, works in ed tech. He's about my age, lives in Manitoba, and we get confused a lot. And we have a really good meme of Obi-Wan Kenobi saying, "This is not the Ken Bauer you're looking for," that we do every time. So if you want fun, you can just hit the other Ken Bauer and he'll answer you. And if you actually just go to kenbauer.me, it will redirect you to my blog. I didn't blog about this talk, but I will soon. And all the slides in this presentation, but not the videos, because the videos aren't mine, are released Creative Commons by non-commercial 4.0. If you don't know what that means, then I recommend you learn what Creative Commons is. I'd be happy to have drinks with you and talk about Creative Commons and open licensing. We'll move on to the next slide, Mark, if you can do that. Thanks. So I have a friend who left us last year. He spent some time in Australia, and I won't look at the slide too much, but this is for Rod. So next slide. So just take a minute and think, what is PD usually like for you? What does that word PD, or professional development, really mean to you? Is this professional development, being here in this room? Is sending John Bergman a tweet sometime on Sunday because you want to get some information from John? Is that professional development? I think a lot of you, let's vote who loves PD. I see no hands because I can't see anything because there's lights. So I'm going to think that nobody loves PD. And the question is really, why do you not like or love professional development? Anyone have an idea they can shout out? What's not right with PD? Scream it. Right. So they're giving you what they think you want, or what they want you to think you want, or I could go on with that analogy. What else? Something that's done to you, not with you. That sounds violating. Wow. Anything else? Don't have? Oh, the when and the how. Excellent. I've got a good slide about MOOCs later, and I'll talk about that. And the right type of MOOC, not the wrong type of MOOC. I didn't get the last part about wonderful resources. Oh, so the expert comes in on education and you ask how many classes they teach? Or something like that? Yeah, I get that too. It's for? Right, design for the pace or the average participant and not for each of you, right? Like it's happening right now, because I can't really individualize this talk for each one of you, unless we're doing this part right now. Okay. A lot of talking but not doing, like we're doing right now. Sorry. I'm Canadian, I got to get all the sorries out that I can. But really, whose fault is that, right? If this is wrong, is this the administrator's fault or is this our fault? That's what I want you to think. Wow, it's time to go. I guess the bar's closed. So I really, really want you to think about whose fault is it if you don't like the way it's being done? Okay? Who's in charge? So we'll go ahead to the next one, and I'll try not to mess you up too much, Mark. Thank you. So there's an excellent book, Personalized PD. You can go ahead and take a picture of that. Jason Bretzman and Dave Burgess writes a lot of good stuff about professional development. Jason also runs, I believe, Monday evenings, but I'm not sure because of the time zone. He does something called Patio PD. The idea is just get some teachers together and have a barbecue and talk about teaching in a more informal environment. And so he has actually a Patio PD day that I didn't do because some other conflict in my schedule happened. But I invite you to think about how you can get together with other educators, and especially ones you don't know, and go out for coffee with them at least, or invite them to have a barbecue or a picnic and talk about your professional development, and not just in such a high-stress setup. Okay, next slide. And I'm going to read this off. I've got a quote from that book, and I need the paper because I couldn't memorize the whole quote. So Jason says that resilient and courageous school leaders need to make bold decisions and create culture in their schools where PD and personalized learning are respected. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole book. You can buy the book on Amazon.com. I don't get a cut out of it. So the next one. Standardize PD, where this bicycle's falling over. And this gets to your point over here. Thank you for the excellent question. When a school or district sets a standard, however well-meaning, they lose or alienate just about everybody they're trying to move forward. Okay, there's the people that, I've already seen this. I'm at my institution for 20 years. They keep bringing out the same courses over and over again, and I don't want to take the same course over and over again. Or there's people that it's just way too above them. It's not personalized. They're going to crash their bicycle. I was thinking of using alienate as the key word for this slide. It would have been more fun. Okay. I talked to people about Haiku Deck before. That's actually what I'm using to create these slides. Makes it a little more visual. Next one. So choice. I'm going to need this again. So Jason came up with an acronym for good PD, and the acronym's choice, constant progress. Okay? We don't want to set a bar of where you want to get all of your faculty to. Why? Why do I not just set the bar and say we need everyone to get up to here? Look at the last slide. So what's the answer? Some are already there. Some of them are way past it, but some of them are way down there, and they're like, oh, there's no way I can get there. I give up and throw the towel. So we need constant progress where we measure where are each one of you now, and where do you want to be next year? Okay, and come up with personal goals in your professional development. H, honoring professionals. What do you think that means? Honoring professionals, that teachers are professionals. What does that mean, Matt? You trust that they're actually going to do something. If we don't tell the teachers what to do, they'll just do nothing because they're not professional. And I don't think that's true. Flip your head and think about how we're treating our students, and we should be treating our teachers the same way, right? I respect that my students will be professional and do their work even if I don't assign them a required assignment. Ongoing, professional development is constant. It's 24/7. Well, not quite, okay? But it's not something you just do in the summer or just do in the breaks. That professional development should be something that's ongoing process in our careers. There's no final level. Individualized, we already talked about that. That each individual can make a path for themselves in their professional development. And the other C is collaborating, okay? We all have students who don't like to work with other students, and there's a lot of discussions we could have right now about not forcing students to collaborate and depending on the situations they're in, but I think it's really important to get teachers together and have them at least sharing what they're doing, maybe not working together on a project, but collaborating through sharing. And the last one is energizing. I think we should leave teachers at the end of a PD session that they're just ready to charge back into their classrooms and not, oh, is it over? Can I close my Facebook? Right? That's how we want to leave people at the end of any PD session. So let's go to the next one. Going ape, I like that phrase that Jason uses, that we should be just like Ramsey in a practice of apply, practice, and explore, the APE method. Okay? Actually apply what you're doing, which came from back here, I believe, right? More doing and less just reading and listening. Go ahead to the next one. Okay. So this is my big bias. This is actually why I have this shirt and probably that decal about reclaim hosting. I believe it's really, really important for us as educators to model for our students, model a culture of sharing, and it's important for you to actually do that. Who here blogs about their educational experiences? So a few. So the people that are beside you, you should help them set up a blog sometime today. Okay. You should be sharing your experience. It could be just an internal blog for your institution, or it could be something out there. Okay. I think it's really important to share your stuff. It doesn't even have to be a blog. It could be your lesson plans. It could be your worksheets. It could be images you've created, music you've created, any kind of resource that you're using in your classroom. You should be sharing it, going back to that first slide where I share everything CC by ND, NC, because I don't want people to make money off it without asking me first. You like free stuff. You go to the internet and grab stuff. That's a visitor relationship where you're going to the internet to consume stuff, not to produce stuff. You should be producing at least as much as you're consuming to make this a sustainable planet and ecosystem. Next slide. You'll notice that I'm giving credit to all of these slides. There's CC license images at the bottom, and this slide deck is shared. So give credit, support those who share. So not just that you share, but you want to create a sharing culture by actually giving credit. I model this to my students. They always ask, Ken, why does every time you publish something it says where it came from, who it was, and so I can go find the original? Because I want to create an environment where my students realize it's important to give credit. If you go back to Robert Fulghum and what we learned in kindergarten, it's really important to say thank you. And giving credit to someone is actually just saying thank you. Okay, my colleague Alan Levine, who does a lot of work in Creative Commons, he releases all of his stuff CC0, which means public domain, which means you can do anything you want with it without even asking for permission or giving credit. But I still give those people credit every time, even though I don't have to legally, because it's the right thing to do, to say thank you to people for their work. So I want you to go look at that. That's Lawrence Lessig, who created the Creative Commons there, giving an excellent speech. Next slide. So I've heard a little bit of discussions here about people thinking there's famous people. I don't include myself in that at all, or a John Bergman coming up. And someone said that they met John Bergman today because I asked if you've met somebody new, and they said they met John. And I think that's really important because you should introduce yourself to people that are those famous people you don't think you can talk to, because they actually talk back and they will share with you. And maybe you feel you don't have a lot to share, but I think you all do. I've done a lot of sessions with faculty sharing their ideas, and they put their stuff out there, and even if nobody else sees what you're sharing, it's an excellent reflective process, and John talked about this when we were doing our debrief. Go home and write stuff down, or if you're jumping on the plane now, that practice of writing it down is an excellent reflective practice, and you could push that publish button and put it out on the internet. So Sophie can read it later, and then she can put a comment on it and say, thank you, okay? So what you're doing has value. I'll also add one more thing here as well. My students see what I do on the internet, and it's kind of weird, because they follow what I'm doing, and they get excited or they get proud going, wow, my teacher's in Australia presenting to a conference, and it's not that they're upset because I'm not there. Well, they're happy because they're doing their final projects and they don't need another class today. But they relate that to them, and it models something for them that they can share as well. I also get my students' parents following me on Twitter, which is really kind of strange, but they're teachers as well, so they like to see what we're doing and give us feedback on what they think the value is to their children that we're doing in our classrooms as flipped teachers. So let's go to the next one. So who does not have a Twitter account? Wow. So Twitter is a pretty powerful tool for education. I think you should set up a Twitter account. I'll give you a little hint. Don't make it private, because then that's not really sharing if you only share to a certain group of people. The other hint is, this is really important, as soon as you set it up, get someone to teach you to go to the settings and turn off all the email alerts, because your mailbox will go nuts if you don't do that. I get that every time I teach people to use Twitter. So that's your hint for Twitter. Everybody tends to know your handle. I go to conferences, and I meet people that I know really well on Twitter, that I've talked to for years, and you hug them because you know them really well, and you're like, what's your name? Laura. Oh, you're Google Guacamole. And that's her Twitter handle. It's the most awesome Twitter handle I know of. And you know that person based on their handle because of what they're doing. Like C21, where are you? There you are at the back. Yeah, I recognize you from your Twitter handle. So let's go to the next one. But be careful, because this is kind of what Twitter is like when you first start Twitter. I know some of you did yesterday. And you're like, this is just the stupidest thing ever. I don't get this Twitter thing. This goes on for a couple weeks. And then you're like, well, Darcy, this is made by Alan Levine. So he says, one of my friends said that's cool, so it must be kind of cool, so I'm going to go check it out. And then you just go up nuts. Everyone's following you, and you're wondering who are all those people following you, and you're getting excited because 10 people followed you today. And then you learn that those are robots. Not real people, because lots of robots are on Twitter. And then you get excited that someone else sent something. I'll see something that John shares or Matt shares, and like, wow, that's really cool. I'm seeing stuff that they're sharing about their practices or something they found, and wow, I'm going to follow that or bookmark that link and go look at that later. And then you're in a meeting and you're tweeting out what's going on during the meeting, like some of you are during this conference, which is actually a powerful tool, because you're sharing what's going on in this conference with the people that are not here. And they feel connected. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then you just can't stop. You're like tweeting nonstop. You find the night mode so that it's not so bright when you're in bed and your spouse isn't upset at you for using the phone in bed. You just go crazy, and then it just continues. Okay, this is an image by Alan Levine talking about Twitter. Next one. So back to the list of lists, I want you to think about 3 new tools you're going to implement over your vacation. Most of you are going into a vacation break. What are the 3 new tools you can go into? Well, almost, right? I'm not. I'm in between semesters here in a second. So it might be Twitter. It might be something else. Just don't choose too many, please. Okay, focus on a few tools and learn a few tools over your break, plus Lego. Next one. I'm going to skip this video, but I did share this slide deck, and there's an excellent video by Dave O. White on Twitter, and it's about this concept of a visitors and residents. Has anyone heard of visitors and residents? I think I can explain it quicker than the 3-minute piece I was going to play out of this video. You've heard of digital native? Okay? Digital natives. Digital natives are sort of kids, or me, because I started doing computing when I was a wee lad, because I was weird. Right. People that have grown up with computing. And I remember meeting Mark Prensky when I first met John, and he gave a talk at the same conference, and this grated me, this idea of digital native, because digital native means the kids know more about the digital stuff than me. I've been doing computing since I was 10 in 1979, right? So I've got way more computing experience than my digital native millennial students. So it kind of grated at me. I think, and I also say that it's not necessarily a digital native means that you're digitally literate. right? You grew up in it, but it doesn't mean you need to know how to use the tools. And you'll know this because your students ask you, Mrs. So-and-so, how do I look for this on Google? Oh, wait a minute. Let me just type what you said into Google for you, and I'll hit enter, and I just did it for you. You could do that yourself. Students aren't necessarily comfortable with their digital literacy. We have to help them. Dave talks about something called visitors and residences. It's more of a scale. It's sliding. Visitors are, you're getting lots of cool free stuff on the internet, but you're not producing anything. And residence is more that you're sharing more on the internet than you are consuming stuff on the internet. And sharing could be writing a Facebook post and sharing to a community on a group. Like I joined a group here in Australia for Flip Class. Sharing can be that inside a closed system, or it could be out on the open internet. But I'm sharing something that I found with a group of people. That's being a resident on the internet. There's links on the slides. You can go watch Dave White's excellent video talking about this. It's about 8 minutes, the entire video. So I'll go to the next one after the next one. Thank you. You're awesome, Mark. People matter. Stories are critical. Okay? Listen to the stories your students are saying. Listen to the stories your colleagues are saying about their experiences. We'll go to the next one. I think I have a video. Yeah, so the video's the next one, but hold on here for a second. So my friend Alan Levine, who shares lots and lots and lots, calls out for people to share stories of connectedness. Okay, and I'm going to tell a story here about how I met John, which led me into meeting someone else, which led me leading into Brian Bennett, which led me into leading Alan Levine, which led into me giving a course for teachers in Guadalajara, which is actually where I live, but not the teachers I worked with. And Alan collects these stories. He's got about 120 stories, I think, about connectedness and why it's important to reach out on the internet and meet people. There's also an excellent piece here by Amy Burvall. I was talking to Tim earlier, and I said Tim really needs to meet Amy Burvall because she does excellent artwork. So we'll cue up this video, and I can have a drink of water.
Hello, K-12 Online Conference. I'm Alan Levine. I'm really happy to be here today. Actually, in Vermont on a beautiful, sort of beautiful, rainy day to talk about stories. Always about stories. Okay, hopefully that message means something to you. Sure did to me. But back to the stories. Amy Burvall, an amazing creative force. Amazing. I gotta stop saying amazing, but Amy's amazing. In just black, pink, and white, what she draws and what she shares. She didn't just give me one story. She gave me 10 stories, and they're all worth listening to. But a lot of what Amy does in these stories is talk about, again, how she actively puts out messages, asks people to get involved in her projects, and when she was a teacher with her students. And so I'm just going to put one story in here of how Amy was teaching her students, and they were listening to TED Talks, and her practice of having her students do back-channel conversations about the speakers during these videos. And what happens, because the speakers sometimes listen and talk back, again, it changes everything for these students to be heard. And it's pretty darn simple. Here, let Amy tell us about it.
And the cool part was we would find out what the Twitter handles were of the speakers. And a couple of times, the speakers would actually write us back as we were watching. And this blew my students' minds away. Doug Rushkoff wrote us, I know, and John Ronson, who is brilliant and did one of my favorite TED Talks about strange answers to the psychopath test. He was kind enough to write my students as well. And it just brought a whole new level. I mean, it completely changed their view of what school could be.
Ken Bauer, originally from Canada, but being a teacher in Mexico for the last 20 years, tells some great stories about both the influence of people suggesting him to try new things, and also what happens when he takes that as a leverage to go out and create connections with other people.
Later that same year, I ran into John Bergman, one of the pioneers in flipped learning, at our main campus in Monterey. Had a great talk with him, and he said, Ken,
you know, you need to like stir up flip learning here in Mexico. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll create a private Facebook group and for our people here at the tech. And he said, no, you got to be public. You got to open this up to everyone. And you need to be the leader in Mexico for flip learning. So,
and you know what? One thing leads to another, like a chain reaction. Ken gets involved in flip learning. He goes to conference. He meets a teacher educator named Brian Bennett. Brian Bennett's involved in DS-106. Ken gets involved in DS-106 and meets Jim Gruen and myself and Brian Lamb. We start collaborating together, building connected courses together. All of a sudden, Ken is part of this great project that we're working on in Mexico at the University of Guadalajara. One thing leads to another if you put something into it.
And that's the end of the video. So a couple things I wanted to say about Amy. If you're a history teacher, it's mostly, actually she does world history. Amy does these music videos where she changes the word of the music and acts it out herself. Really awesome stuff about international events in history. And also the thing I was going to say about Amy is, the back channel, that she connects her students with really famous people. We had a discussion about this earlier. And that famous person actually answered them on Twitter. And the students are like, oh my goodness, this like super famous person answered my tweet. And they're freaking out. And the teachers are like freaking out too. It's pretty amazing what happens when you do things on the open internet, because other people can hear you and other people can react with what you're doing, and you're also sharing that experience with the larger public. We'll go to the next slide. All right. Another small project I could share with you, I was going to try to do this here, but I'm involved with a project called Virtually Connecting. And the thing that's really beautiful about Virtually Connecting, this was created by Maha Bali in Egypt. Shout out, hi Maha, she'll watch this later, I hope. And Rebecca Hogue and Autumn Keynes are the directors of this. It's an all-volunteer group, and it's people who don't get to go to conferences because it's just really hard to get there. It's far away. And their friends would be at the conference, and they said, hey, why don't we create a Google Hangout, and then you can invite the keynote speaker to sit with you in the hallway, and we can talk to them about what's going on at the conference, and then other people could join the conversation as well that aren't there. And so it works really well for conferences where the keynotes are streamed because the people are in their offices like I was there, and I'll watch the keynote while I'm sitting in my office, and then we're all excited to get into this conversation online and talk to the people that are on site at the conference and sometimes the keynotes and feel connected to that conference. We did an event on open educational resources, or Open Ed, 2 weeks ago in Richmond, Virginia, and I think we did 12 sessions of this, of these 20-minute hangouts with the attendees with Virtually. So Virtually Connecting, you should check that out. It's really awesome. We just passed our 100th video of sessions connecting people to conferences, and I believe we've been doing it for 1.5 years. Next one. How am I doing for time? Yeah. Flip Learning Network, I'll do my advertising. I'm now the chair or president, I'm not really sure. I accidentally volunteered myself for something, and John didn't tell me not to. And so I'm the chair of the Flip Learning Network. A thing we're doing with the Flip Learning Network is we really want it to be more about the community, and to the point of almost rebranding it. The Flip Learning Network isn't this thing somewhere, but the Flip Learning Network is all of us. If you go to the site lately, you'll notice that it's blog posts. There's blog posts from John. There's 1 or 2 from me. But there's blog posts from the community. You can talk to me, and I can set up so that you can write and share directly from that blog yourself, or you can set it up like John has it set up and I have it set up. We can decide, oh, this post on my personal blog with this special magic tag will also show up on the Flip Learning Network site. So it's a way to drive community, that we're all having a contribution into this network. We also happen to have a Slack. I'll talk more about that later. And the Flip Class tag is used every Monday evening in the US. Next slide. So your another task is 3 people that you might have vaguely met at this conference. Like I've talked with Mark over drinks, but I don't really know him. And we should probably connect more after this event. So have a list of at least 3 people that you'd like to reach out to and connect to over the next year, and get excited about the next event of FlipCon Australia. Your tres amigos, as we say in Spanish. Next. So I had to put a David Bowie slide in, and I was happy that there was David Bowie posters at the school today. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about my evolution. And this is actually related because nobody gave me courses on flipped learning. Well, John did. I went to his workshop 3.5 years ago. But I wasn't told to go and do flipped learning. I just decided to do it myself. Almost everything I've done in my practice is because I chose to just go out and do it. Okay, so let's go through Ken's evolution over the last few years. Go ahead, the next one, Mark. So open source is my core value. I prefer tools that are open source. No offense to anyone who uses closed source tools or sells closed source tools, but I think it's really important to use tools that do not lock us in. We have to be careful, even with open source as well as closed source, that the tool you're using just doesn't all of a sudden disappear, which happened to some people in the flipped class community recently, where the tool they were using just disappeared and oh no, what am I going to use now? Okay, go to the next one, but it's more about me because I'm a software engineer. Active learning, I've always been involved in having students do active learning in my classrooms. I teach computer science, so I need that my students are actually banging away on the keyboard, so it makes sense to me to have active learning, but I think we can all find ways to do active learning in our classrooms. Keep going, Mark. You rock. Discussion is a key part of my pedagogy, not just with my colleagues, but I want my students to be talking to each other, not shut up in class, but I want you to be talking about what we're seeing in our classroom together. Okay? And I like to move the discussion not just in the class, but outside the classroom space using tools, but I don't have a lot of time to talk about tools here. Next one. Moodle. I was one of the first users of Moodles back in 2001. Some of you know Moodle. It's an LMS. It's a learning management system. The irony is this slide is much about, if you look, it says right underneath it, get rid of it, and pointing to the LMS. This is kind of the open community, which I'm involved in. We don't like the word learning management system because we don't really like to manage the learning of our students. I'm more about open systems. I don't want to get in a political debate. It'll turn into something ugly. But there's so many of these options. Just choose one that works for you. Just be careful. If you're the weird teacher using something different, that creates conflict for your students as well. There is advantages to being standardized, but I don't like to be standardized. So I just do what I want. Next. Research. I actually started my research in software engineering. It was mostly about best practices and communication patterns of software engineers, but it applies to a lot of my pedagogy of communication in students' learning, okay? That learning really is about communication and learning is about connecting between people. So that ties into my philosophy on education. Next. Flip version 1. I saw one of our bosses give a talk about flipped classroom. I immediately opened up my laptop like Matt is now, didn't pay attention to the talk, Googled flipped classroom, read about John, read about Aaron. I'm like all excited, and I'm going to do this. And I thanked David Garza at the end of the talk. Excellent, thank you for pointing me to flipped learning. I have no idea what you talked about after that, but I'm going to do this in August. And he said, great, tell me about it later. So that was my first flip, really version 1. Classic. I just took all the homework assignments I used to do at home. We did them in class, and I assigned reading outside of class, and I didn't lecture anymore. That was my first version, flip 1. I don't know, 4 years ago, I guess. Next. It's okay to fail. I love this phrase. Courage, going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. Winston Churchill. There's a video next. We'll just listen to the video. These are my students. It's an activity I do every semester at the beginning of class. Well, not live, it's recorded. Not live. I'm not streaming, it's not on Periscope, don't worry. All right. So, I want you all to scream, it's okay to fail. Ready? On the count of 3, then you yell it. 1, 2, 3. It's okay to fail! All right, good. But I'm recording it, and I want you to really get the message that it's okay to fail because that's how we learn. All right? You ready, everybody? I want screaming. Scare the teachers next door, please. All right? Ready? 1, 2,
3.
1, 2, 3.
2, 3. Right on. That was good. Thanks, everybody.
So 1, 2, 3.
Right on. That was awesome.
That wasn't very loud. They weren't so good. So I've got that up on a Flickr album. It's a fun activity I like to do at the beginning of every one of my semesters. And the students don't really get it at first, but later they do. When I used to mark assignments, I would mark them, I'd give them feedback, and then they could just fix it and give it back to me. And I'd give them the points, because it's okay to fail. They don't have to worry so much about those points on that assignment and waiting to the last second to hand things in. Next. My flipped version 2, I went into mastery. I went with no deadlines. This freaked the lots of stuff out of my students because they weren't good at time management. We saw this today, I think. Someone was talking about time management at the school we were at, teaching the students how to manage their time. A lot of my students pushed back on me because I'd have the deadline at the end of the semester for everything. And it freaked them out, and it didn't work well for them, some of them. And they said, Ken, I can't do stuff unless you give me a specific deadline. And I sat with them and I said, okay, well, let's just make up some deadlines for you. And we'll write them down, but they're not real, but let's just write them down and fake yourself out. I've got videos of students saying exactly that. Next one. How to build a community. So I created a system where my students don't hand in homework to Ken. I want them to hand in homework to Ken so I can push button and give them points. But I want them always to share their solutions to all of their assignments in the open to the rest of their classmates. But then they'll copy from each other. No, they won't. Because if the students publish their answers and then someone copies their answers, everybody in the whole class is going to know that they copied from this person because that person published their answers first. It's kind of like the scientific community, publish first. It worked really well. And then I kept going. Next one. I decided rather than just sharing with each other, they needed to share on the entire internet. So 2 years ago, I started where my students submit every single assignment they publish on their own blog. And so they can have people on the internet looking at what they're doing. They're more likely to give quality work because they're not just handing in to Ken Bauer, who might or might not look at their work. They are exposed to the internet with what they're doing. It actually works really well because it creates a community of learning where my students this semester are going back and looking at what my students from previous semesters did on their assignments. And they're not necessarily perfect assignments. They're going back and going, I don't like the way they did this. I like to do it this way better. And they're doing comparisons and not thinking there's always a right answer to what they do in my classrooms. So blogging is working really well. Plus, as engineers, they need to get better at communicating, written and spoken. Next one. This is my latest experiment from January. This is Joe Bauer, who left us early January. I didn't actually know him. He left us with an early part in life of the heart attack. But Joe has an excellent blog where he shared lots, and he shared about his concept of abolish grading. And so what I did this semester as an experiment, again, I didn't ask permission. I will ask forgiveness later. I decided not to have grading of any of my assignments in my classes, and I have some kind of fuzzy way to give them a grade because I need to submit one. A lot of my colleagues say I'm crazy because they just won't do anything. My anecdotal evidence is they're actually doing more. They're actually doing more work because I'm not restricting them with the assignments they have to do. They're just going out and finding stuff to work on. I could talk about that for hours, but another time. Listen to your students. Please, okay? As my dad always says, 2 ears, 1 mouth. We need to listen way more than we're talking with our students. Especially with flipped classroom, right? You're not lecturing anymore. You gotta shut up and spend more time listening to your students, and it's okay if we don't talk all the time in class. So one activity I do with my students is at the end of every semester, I'd like to say stole this idea, but I don't like the word stole, because you steal something when I take it and you no longer have it. If I take your idea, then I'm not stealing your idea, because you still have the idea. So I took this idea from somewhere else that they wrote letters to the next class of students to say, you're in Mr. Bauer's class. This is how you should, he's weird. There's no deadlines. It's really freaky, and all these kind of advice. But I had them create videos. I've got, I think, about 100 of these. But this one was really awesome. So I want to share with you a video from Paula. And she talks about our class. I think that's what's next. Yeah, it is.
Hey there, this video will be a quick review of my TC101 course, or what is the same, my Compo Uno class. I've never been in a course like this. It was a whole new experience to me. But let's start from the beginning. The first class Ken told us that points were worthless and we wouldn't have any lecture during the course. My reaction was, oh my god, where have I got myself into? However, I started blogging and coding and visiting Ken's office when needed, and to my surprise, learning a lot. I didn't even know what a terminal window was or a code editor. But well, however, I started questioning my whole learning process during my last 15 years of school. And I realized that I didn't learn as much as I thought, because I was used to memorize stuff. Beside the programming course, I learned that there's a lot of useful tools on the internet and that you can learn by yourself. You can ask for help to people that you don't know. And I became a kind of Google ninja, like Ken said. I love that expression. The most important thing to me in this course is that I didn't study for my final exam. The night before the test was the media station event, and as a lad I had to be there. So I gave a quick review to my notes, and next morning during the test I knew what I was coding, and I wasn't remembering what I did in other codes to find the solution. Because I learned that the teacher should be just a guide and not a person that stands in front of a bunch of students telling them what to do and how to do it. The education process is more than that. If this is the Tech 21 education model, let me tell you that I love it. Thanks for watching, and thank you Ken for all the support and all the patience during all the course. Definitely points are worthless. Thanks.
Credit. Oh. Crediting Mozart. So that's Pau. I will admit this is like an extreme example of my students. But I've got lots of students. She said a few important things there. The night before our exam, there was this sharing event where she's a digital arts student, and they all have to show their big, massive final projects in their art courses. And so she couldn't study for my final exam because she was busy till 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night showing their artwork. But what she was really saying is, because I was doing hands-on, I didn't need to study for the exam, which means push all the stuff in your head the night before and have it vomit out on the exam paper later. She actually knew what she was doing, and she felt confident going into the exam. There's a few other things there about our Tech 21 model, our institutions trying to make changes to a more student-centered, student-focused learning environment. The school we visited today, it was beautiful because they're all flipping. And I talked to the two girls, Donna and Angela, today, and I said, what is it like from your point of view as a student? I'm taking off my tie, your teachers are away, tell me the truth. And they said that's the really nice thing is all of their classes are being done like this. For my students, it's weird because I'm the weird guy, and I get away with it because I'm the Canadian in Mexico. So I can do weird stuff and wear t-shirts at school. But they struggle because the rest of their classes aren't done this way. So if you're in an environment where you're the lone wolf flipping, it can be really hard. And your students have to deal with, oh, my physics thing's due tomorrow. Oh, my chemistry thing's due the next day. And they're always focused on these deadlines. And Ken's is what we call in Mexico mañana time. Mañana doesn't mean tomorrow. It means sometime in the future, but not now. I've learned that after 20 years in Mexico. So this is the struggles my students have, but listening to them is wonderful. I've got way more videos about this. Go to the next slide. We're almost done. I took this from, it's from Mark Siegel. I asked him if I can use it, but he hasn't answered yet. But oh well, I'm going to use it. Mark posts these words of wisdom, words of awesome every day. And I love this because I do not have ducks. I do not have a row. I have squirrels, and they're at a rave. Right? And someone talked about in their classroom, actually it was Cindy at the school this morning, that her classrooms are loud. And if someone comes into their classroom, you're looking, where's the teacher? Because it's a loud experience. It's an exhausting experience when I'm flipping my classroom. I'm running around, and I'm exhausted, and then I got to go to another class, and I got to do the same thing over again. It's chaos. And I think as an educator, the hardest thing for me and for educators that I work with in flipped classroom is letting go of control. Letting go of control of our classroom, because they're going to go wild. And same thing with administrators, need to let go of control. You can't control chaos. And chaos is a good thing. Learning is messy. Next one. So it's not you, it's not me, it's us. We have to do this together. We have to find a way that if I'm doing professional development, like right now, I hope when I go back to my institution, they're going to give me some FlipCon fake money or points or jelly beans or whatever the unit we use to measure of how many hours of credit I get for my professional development because I'm here, right? And I hope a lot of you are doing that as well, and you get some kind of credit. In Mexico, it's normal. We get certificates when we attend the conferences because that's like currency towards our professional development. I found it weird, but it's actually a good idea. Next. I offer a MOOC, and not the bad MOOC. Samuel Jackson's not going to come and say MOOC one more time to me. When I say MOOC, I mean a connectivist MOOC, a la Dave Cormier, where it's more about the people taking the MOOC, communicating with each other, and not the spoonful fire hose of content MOOC, which we call XMOOCs. Okay. So I offer a MOOC. I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years. I think I've done 10 of them. I'll probably do it through the FLN in January. If anyone speaks Spanish, I'll do a Spanish language one as well. But I get a lot of demand for Spanish ones, obviously, from where I am. But I'll offer an English and a Spanish version. The idea of it is that you read about the 4 pillars of flipped classroom. I give you some suggestions of what to read on each of the pillars. You write your reflections about those 4 pillars. Some of you have never set up a blog, so you need to do that so you can write your reflections. And then you meet some people. And then I write a little nice fake note that says you should get 30 hours of credit, and hopefully your administrators respect that. Okay, so you can contact me about that. Thank you very much. I'm Ken Bauer on Twitter. KenBauer.me is my website. This slide deck's up at speakerdeck.com, Ken W. Bauer, because the other guy beat me to it. And fliplearning.org is the Flip Learning Network. And we have a Slack. If you don't know what a Slack is, it's kind of like messaging in a private space, so only the people in the space can see it. It's kind of instant messaging. It works on your phone, it works on your tablet, it works on the web. So if you want to join our Slack and talk to other Flip class educators, join us. I'm done.